Open 5 terminals because that's what we're going to need to set up this replica set. Open up the first one and create the directories which are going to store the data files. We create 3 of them, rs1, rs2 and rs3, one for each of the servers. Open up the second terminal and we are going to set up the first server of the replica set. We'll be using the command mongol and specify the options as required to set up the replica set. So we use the --repl set option to specify the name of the replica set, in this case rs1, --log path, here 1.log to specify the name of the log file, the --db path to specify the data directory, here the rs1 that we just created, and the port 27017 that the server will listen on. We've started it up and we can see all logs going to 1.log. Open up the second terminal and we'll use the same command to set up the second server with different options. We'll be using the same replica set, so we specify it as rs1 similar to the earlier case. The log path here will be 2.log. The db path will be /data/rs2 for the second replica set, and the port will be 27018 for the second server. So all logs going to 2.log. We next take the third terminal to set up the third server. We'll use the same command. The replica set name will be the same. The log file will be 3.log. The data file path will be /data/rs3 and it will listen on port 27019. So we run the command and all logs go into 3.log. We now have to connect to this replica set and configure it. So to open up the shell, we use the mongo command and connect to one of the servers of the replica set. we first create a config file specifying the ID for the replica set. In our case, it is rs1, and we then specify the members of the replica set. So here we have 3 members for the replica set. We assign it the ID 0, 1 and 2. The first member on host, localhost 27017. The second ID 1 and the host 27018. The third will be ID 2 and the host will be 27019. So let's run this command to specify the config. We would then proceed to initiate the replica set based on this config. We use the command rs.initiate config to initiate the config based on the config file specified. So it says that the config is now saved locally. It should be coming up in a minute. So we have initiated the process of setting up the replica set, and we could check the status of the replica set. So the first thing to note is that the prompt has changed to rs1 secondary, showing that the Mongo or the shell is currently connected to rs1, one of the secondaries of the replica set rs1. This is the time when the members of the replica set are voting to decide which is the primary. Now we check again, and this time we notice that we are connected to the primary. Also, all 3 members of the replica set have come online. 27017 is the primary, 27018 and 27019 are the secondaries. Now let's run a few commands to navigate through our database. We run show DBs to see the list of DBs in the current database. It shows us that it has one database called local. We use local to specify that local would be the directory, the DB we want to connect to. We then ask for a list of collections in this database. So we have got oplog.rs, slaves, startup log, system.indexes, system.repl set are the collections in this database. So now let's take a look at what's in the oplog.rs collection. So we find one record with some information about what went on behind the scenes while the replica set was being set up. We also have a look at what is there in the system.indexes file. So there is one index on the underscore ID, the default index. Let's also have a look at what is there in the REPL set, system.REPL set collection, and we find that it stores the information that we provided in the configuration. So they have specified the members, ID 0, ID 1, the host, that is 27017, 27018 and 27019. Now let's run a few basic commands on the shell. So we specify that we want to use the demo database, and to check the current database we use the command db and find that we are in the demo database. Now we do an insert to this collection that we defined called demo. So we have got a database called demo in which we intend to create a collection called demo and insert a document with name is Anand. Now let's go and have a look at the list of DBs. So we find that we have added demo to the list of DBs which wasn't there earlier. We have created it, and we check out the collections in that database. So we find there are two collections, a collection called demo and a collection called system.indexes. Now we check whether the insert has taken place. Fine, and we find that the document has been created with an underscore ID assigned. Okay, so let's again go back to the oplog to check whether we have the data appearing in the oplog. So we have to make sure that we switch back to the local database. And you'll find here again that there is no change in the data in the REPL set. All hosts or all servers are currently online. Okay, we proceed to check what happened in the oplog. Now if you look at the oplog, you will find that the operation that we carried out of inserting a document into the primary has appeared in the oplog. Behind the scenes, the secondaries are looking up the oplog to update their own data. So now we have to connect to another port to see whether the data has been updated. We know that 27018, the server on 27018 is running a secondary. So we first check whether the databases appear there. So we find the two databases, demo and local. If you notice that demo was the database we created in the primary, and it also shows up in the secondary now. We can also look up the op log, and we find that the same action or the operation that we carried out in the primary appears in this op log too. So we now go to find out if the data that we inserted in the primary appears here. So we use the demo database and we ask it to show the collections. So here an important thing that you have to note is, by default reads are not enabled on a secondary. You have to use the rs.slaveok command to enable reads on a secondary, and it has to be done on each secondary. Having done that, we now find that we can use the show collections command, and it shows us the collections in the demo database. And on running the find command, we find that the document that we had inserted in the primary now appears in the secondary too. We now exit our connection to the first secondary, that is 27018, and we connect to the second secondary, that is 27019. As is evident from the prompt, we are connected to secondary. We again check that the databases are similar to what we created in the primary. We use local, check the collections, and we now proceed to check if the data that we created in the primary shows up here. So again, we need to specify the slave OK command so that we can read from this secondary. We check the collections. We have both the collections in place. One is the demo collection and the second is the system.indexes. And we run the find command and find that the document that we inserted in the primary appears in this secondary too. Now what we try and do is we insert a document, or we try to insert a document into the demo collection using a secondary, and we find that we get an error message saying that it is not a primary and therefore the insert won't take place. So what's important to note is that writes can go only to a primary. You can read from the secondaries as well as the primary. We now again connect back to the primary to do some more testing on the replica set. We get to the first replica set, the primary one, listening on 27017, and we take it offline. We just use Ctrl C to take it offline. And we find that it says that it couldn't connect to the server on 27017. So what we do is now we connect to the other port and have a look at the status of the replica set, and it shows you that 27017 is not reachable. 27018 has now become the primary and 27019 is the secondary. So we are currently connected to 27019. We check out the databases. Everything is in order, running 27019. So what we can see here now is we had a replica set with 3 members, 1 primary and 2 secondaries. Now the first primary has gone down. Another member has been upgraded to a primary, in this case 27018, and the third member 27019 continues to be the secondary. Now the next thing we do is to bring 27017 back online. So we run the same command, and you'll notice that because we specify the same log file, it will append to that log file. Now we again go ahead and connect to the current primary. We connect to the server running on 27017. When you don't specify a port option, it connects to 27017. And we now find that we are connected to a secondary, because 27017, when it came back online, first becomes a secondary, because we already have the primary at 27018 functional. So we now have a situation where we have the primary at 27018 and 2 secondaries, one on 27017 and the second one on 27019. So we've gone through the entire process of setting up a replica set, taking the primary out, seeing another one being promoted to the primary, bringing the earlier primary back online, and seeing how it gets assigned to a secondary. That completes our understanding of the setting up of a replica set, the features of a replica set, and what it has to offer.